What's up everyone, Tony here, and welcome to the first episode of Road to E3 2019, a new video series here at SSG Network. It is May, E3 begins in less than a month, and I think it's about time we all jump on the hype train. In the coming weeks, I'll be releasing a number of videos covering what are, in my mind, the most hyped games, the most exciting leaks, or the most buzzworthy stories heading into the biggest week of the year in gaming. For me, E3 season has always been a time of great excitement, kind of like Christmas. And when I was a kid, I always used to look through all the catalogs, circle the gifts I wanted, create a massive wish list, and really not worry too much about the logistics. I just wanted all the cool stuff. We're basically going to be doing the same thing here. It's all about positive vibes and excitement here on the road to E3 2019, so I'm going to try to leave the negativity at the door, or at least save it for after the show. But for now, let's get hype. I think this series should begin with a property currently experiencing a level of popularity that transcends just the world of video games. In fact, we're probably looking at the biggest name in entertainment, period. It's Marvel Comics. It's not overselling to say that this last year has been the biggest ever for Marvel. I remember talking about Marvel around this time last year and thinking Infinity War, which absolutely dominated at the box office, brought a level of buzz to the Marvel name that would never be topped and could have been the perfect lead-in to some Marvel megatons at E3 2018. Well, as it turns out, Infinity War was only the beginning of the insane momentum Marvel would go on to build in 2018 and 2019. Since E3 2018, Marvel brought home an Academy Award for Best Animated Feature thanks to Into the Spider-Verse. Carol grossed $1 billion on her first try with Captain Marvel, and of course, there's the big one. Avengers Endgame has ruled the world, and while I write this, it may be sitting at number 2, but it's just a matter of days before the Avengers sit on top of that list as the highest grossing movie in cinematic history. Not bad for a film series that started in a cave with a bunch of scraps. But perhaps the biggest driver of hype when it comes to a potential Marvel game showing up at E3 doesn't come from the movies at all. Instead, it comes from another game. Last September, the much anticipated PS4 exclusive Spider-Man game was finally released, and my god, did it deliver. I thought Spider-Man was an absolute masterpiece. I mean, if it was any other year, this is my game of the year with a bullet. Just an awesome, satisfying ride from start to finish, and stands as one of the few games I've ever played where I felt compelled to play from the beginning to 100% completion without even putting it down. Most important of all, it managed to do the impossible, and top Spider-Man 2 for the GameCube. Holy crap. I think it's safe to say my excitement for a new AAA Marvel game is now at an all-time high. Insomniac has risen the bar with Spider-Man, putting out not only a great superhero game, but just a great game, period. Whoever has to follow this beast has their work cut out for them, that's for sure. So, with some of that perspective established, we arrive at E3 2019, and we arrive at the next AAA Marvel game, Square Enix's Avengers Project. Avengers Project is now in a position to follow not only the biggest movie of all time in Avengers Endgame, but perhaps also the biggest superhero game of all time with Spider-Man on PS4. However, as lofty as those expectations might be, I am optimistic. I don't think Disney and Marvel would have entrusted Square Enix with the biggest property in all of entertainment if they didn't think they were up to the task. Amazingly enough, we have not heard any official updates on the Avengers project since it was first revealed back in early 2017 with a teaser trailer. To make things worse, Square claimed we'd get more news on the project in 2018, and here in 2019, I could say for sure that was a lie. So when it comes to stuff we actually know for sure about the game, that list is basically non-existent. At the moment, all we could do is speculate based on this initial teaser trailer. We hear an unknown female narrator speaking over shots of the iconic icons of the Avengers.
They say the time of heroes is over. That if you're different, you're dangerous. But I know the truth. The world will always need heroes. We just need to reassemble.
Bruce Banner's broken eyeglasses as the Hulk roars in the distance, Cap's shield, Thor's hammer, and Iron Man's glove, hand, gauntlet, whatever you want to call it. From this teaser, I immediately wondered, could this narrator be one of the Avengers? Black Widow, perhaps? Captain Marvel? Or maybe Maria Hill? One thing I think is for sure, though. These 4 icons being present in the very first teaser trailer, we are seeing that for a reason. These characters will be playable in this game. I can't fathom an Avengers game being made without at least the big 4 being playable in some form or fashion. But outside of that light speculation, that's really about it when it comes to this teaser. Things get a little more interesting if we look at some of the various leaks that have been floating around. They come in 2 forms. First, we have some very interesting personnel hires that give us some clues regarding the game's general structure. Second are the ones that we really need to take with a grain of salt, the classic insider providing small but juicy tidbits of information. Let's begin with those key hires, and to be honest, these alone provide enough insights to get me ridiculously hyped for this game. By examining the history of some new additions to the team at Crystal Dynamics, we could begin putting some of those puzzle pieces together and start to get an idea of just what this game is going to look like. First up, we have Sean Escaig. Sean first joined Naughty Dog in 2011 during the early days of development for a little game called The Last of Us. Since then, he worked on Uncharted 4, and his biggest role at the company came when he acted as both writer and creative director of the Uncharted 4 expansion, Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. Simply put, this dude is an absolute beast, and was a key contributor on some of the most critically acclaimed games of the last 2 generations. He announced in January 2018 that he was leaving Naughty Dog to join Crystal Dynamics, and according to his Twitter, his role seems to now be creative director/writer on the Avengers project. This hire tells me one thing. If Square is going out there and recruiting big players from a studio like Naughty Dog, a studio that is able to tell stories through games at a level above damn near everyone else in the industry, then I think this Avengers project is in very good hands. Also, I think this hire in particular clears up a common misconception that seems to be going around regarding this game. Some seem to believe Avengers Project will be an online-only, Destiny-like game as a service that heavily focuses on multiplayer. I have a really hard time believing that to be true when you see Square Enix out here hiring the dude from Uncharted to write and direct the game. At this point, I'm almost certain that Avengers Project will be a single-player, story-driven experience at its core, much like Spider-Man on PS4. If there is a multiplayer mode, it would exist in addition to that main single-player core. Now, as cool as that hire sounds, I'm not sure if any hire in the history of games put a smile on my face quite like the next one. For a moment, let's rewind all the way back to the distant past of April 2018. I don't know about you, but when I first played the new God of War game, I had so much fun just throwing my axe around and catching it, and killing dudes and catching it, rinse and repeat again and again and again. And I kid you not, one of my first thoughts when playing that game was something along the lines of, man, they could make a really amazing Thor game if it played something like this. Well, it seems like Odin heard my wishes or something, because it has come out that Vince Napoli, the lead systems designer for God of War, the man who in his very own LinkedIn profile takes credit for design/implementation/ownership of all axe throw/recall mechanics in God of War, has joined Crystal Dynamics in May of 2018 and is now the lead combat designer for the Avengers project. The guy who did God of War's combat will now be in charge of Thor's combat, and Cap's combat, and Hulk's combat. I'm gonna be completely honest, this hire is what sent my hype into overdrive for this game. With Vince Napoli on board, we are going to get the most satisfying hammer and shield throwing in the history of video games. It's literally my dream come true. Damn, this is so hype. Next up, let's see what those leakers have to say. To be honest, I want to bring up these leaks primarily because I think they bring up a bunch of interesting discussion points, whether they end up being true or not. So let's get started with this one from Reset Era, which was posted in November of 2018. Reset Era in particular is a pretty good source of legit leaks simply because the mods are super strict there, and they require anyone claiming to be a leaker to verify their claims with documentation, or else they get banned. That doesn't necessarily confirm that these leaks are 100% correct though, so with that in mind, let's see what the Reset Era leaker had to say. The leaker begins by trying to clear up that misconception that I mentioned earlier about how the Avengers is supposedly going to be a multiplayer-focused games-as-a-service game. Avengers Project will have a, quote, heavy story/narrative focus and not in any way be a shallow online/multiplayer-only title. A deep single-player experience has been a priority/focus since the project's inception. I always picture this game in my head as Spider-Man for PS4, except you play as the Avengers, so I'm happy to hear leaks like this that kind of reinforce that thinking. It'll be a third-person, AAA, single-player focused experience. So I think from that point alone, it is safe to get hype. I don't mind a deep multiplayer mode in addition to a long, well-done single-player campaign, as any subscriber of my channel could probably gather from all of my Red Dead Redemption 2 and Red Dead Online coverage. But I think that meaty single-player campaign being there day one is so key in 2019. If they put out a multiplayer-focused game with a ton of microtransactions and constant hooks attempting to nickel and dime the player, I really think this would be dead in the water even with the strong branding. We've seen it happen. Luckily, a Battlefront 2 situation does not seem to be the case here with the Avengers project. The leaker goes on to specify that the game will feature several of the Avengers as playable characters in a heavy, story-driven co-op campaign that can be played solo or with up to 4 players co-op. Playing co-op and just wrecking fools with 4 Avengers on screen at once sounds pretty sweet to me. One very interesting part of this leaker's post is right here, where he cryptically claims if you require any further proof, I'll just mention Kamala Khan. This has led some to link this post to another potential Avengers project leak that originated from Reddit. This one dates back to May of 2018, just after Kevin Feige confirmed that Marvel Studios has plans for Ms. Marvel in the MCU. The Reddit poster claims that Ms. Marvel is going to be a main figurehead in the story of the Avengers game. If true, that makes me believe the narrator of the teaser might actually be Ms. Marvel, aka Kamala Khan.
They say the time of heroes is over. That if you're different, you're dangerous. But I know the truth. The world will always need heroes. We just need to reassemble.
And that would actually be pretty cool. The story, much like Infinity War, begins with the Avengers disassembled. Though the catalyst this time is not Civil War, which sounds pretty interesting, and I assume the cause of this rift will play a major part of the story. Apparently there's a centralized hub in the form of a crashed helicarrier, and from there you can select locations to travel to, one of those locations being AIM Island. I can only imagine some of the iconic locations from the MCU like New York, Germany, Sokovia, and of course Wakanda will be locations in the game as well. I'm curious if this game will have any cosmic element at all, allowing for locations like Asgard or Sakaar, or maybe a final boss battle on Titan. We should probably slow down a bit though. I do expect we'll be bound to Earth for this game, though that isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, Spider-Man only took place in New York and it was freaking fantastic. Maybe we'll go to space in Avengers 2 for the PS6. Perhaps the juiciest of info from this Reddit leak comes in the form of playable character confirmations. The leaker says there are going to be, quote, a lot of characters in the base game, a shit ton. It sounds like Ms. Marvel will play a big role in the story, and I'm guessing that means she'll be playable. Black Bolt might be playable, but according to the leaker, you might just visit his home over the course of the game, as opposed to playing as his yelling ass. The leaker also specifies Iron Man being playable, which I'm sure is just shocking news for everyone watching this, and Hawkeye will be playable as well. He plays like Lara Croft, and I mean, I thought that one was a layup considering Crystal Dynamics is working on the game. You can't just throw away all that sweet, sweet bow tech now that you have your hands on frickin' Hawkeye. Each character will have their own unique gameplay systems, and with those systems, a skill tree. I suspect it'll act a lot like the one we saw in Spider-Man. Finally, the leaker addresses the whole X-Men situation, which has always been a mess when it comes to video games. But with Disney officially acquiring Fox, it shouldn't be a problem much longer. He claims Wolverine will be playable in the base game, but any other X-Men or Fantastic Four characters will likely be added in as DLC post-launch. Avengers Project was probably in the works long before word of the Disney-Fox merger got out, so I wouldn't be surprised if it was too late in the process to go back and add a bunch of X-Men and Fantastic Four characters. I'm really hoping this turns out to be true and we get some of these characters as DLC eventually. Also, regarding the Guardians of the Galaxy or Nova, don't expect to see them here in Avengers Project, since Square is also hard at work on an entirely separate Guardians of the Galaxy game. While a Guardians game hasn't officially been announced, its existence was more or less confirmed from trustworthy Eurogamer and Kotaku sources. But that's a game we'll probably be talking about more during the Road to E3 2020 or 2021. Ultimately, whether or not these leaks are true or false, I hope they at least get your minds racing about at least some of the crazy stuff we could see in the Avengers project. There are a number of reasons why E3 2019 would be the perfect place for Avengers Project to resurface. As mentioned earlier in the video, the timing could not be better on the Marvel side of things. Marvel is coming off a massive success in the video game sphere, and the biggest success in film history is now an Avengers movie. If the powers that be can't find a way to put something together for this E3, coming off Spidey PS4 and Avengers Endgame, I really feel like that would be a massive misstep on both the part of Marvel and Square Enix. And don't forget about Square Enix, the other piece of this puzzle. With the releases of marquee titles like Dragon Quest XI, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and Kingdom Hearts 3, the path is now clear for Square to start focusing on some new titles and really push what's next into the forefront at E3 2019. Besides, they said they'd tell us more in 2018. If they still have nothing to show 6 months into 2019, then that leads me to believe there are some problems going on behind the scenes, and that ain't a good look. Final Fantasy VII Remake and Avengers Project would be the perfect 1-2 punch from Square at E3 this year. And considering they'll be having their own E3 press conference, I sincerely hope they intend to bring the goods and show us more from their 2 biggest games. However, it's not unusual to see big reveals take place during one of the big 3's press conferences, even if third-party devs like EA, Ubisoft, or Square Enix hold an event of their own at E3. With Sony absent at this year's E3 and Nintendo already covered on the Marvel front with the upcoming Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, I think Microsoft's press conference is where we'll see Avengers Project make its big splash at this year's E3. Surely Microsoft feels the pressure from Sony and Nintendo both having their own exclusive Marvel games. If Microsoft can't get their own exclusive, the very least they could do is at least feature a big multi-platform game to bring some hype to their main stage presentation, much like they did with Cyberpunk 2077 last year. Come E3 2019, I expect we'll see a trailer for the game much like the one we saw for Spider-Man back at E3 2016. At the very least, I think we'll see Hulk, Cap, Iron Man, and Thor gameplay directly from the game with the cinematic flair fitting for a trailer. At long last, we'll see just how each of the big 4 Avengers control, and I think that's enough to keep fans hyped as we continue ever closer to the game's launch, and perhaps even cross-gen launch given the timing of the game's release. And speaking of cross-gen, I think that's a perfect point to call it a wrap for today's video, and transition into the next video as the E3 2019 hype train continues. Next time I'll be talking all about the PlayStation 5 and the overall presence of next-generation consoles at E3 2019. What did that Wired article tell us about the PlayStation 5? And what games could we see on the new consoles currently rumored to be released in late 2020? Find out next time as the road to E3 2019 continues. As always, if you like this video, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel, because the E3 hype is only going to get crazier as we get closer and closer to the big show, taking place June 11th to 13th. Also, keep an eye out for new Red Dead Online content here on the channel, as the game has finally received an absolutely gigantic update, and I'll be picking that apart in the coming days and weeks, in addition to all of the E3 craziness. So, until next time, thanks so much for watching everyone, and take care.